using steel cables to hold the span and steel girders to build towers taller than any building built before. Now you don't see the steel in the towers because building with steel was a new thing. People are nervous about new things, so to keep those people calm, they always decided it was better to hide the steel inside stone, even though the steel was stronger. Well, we watched the bridge go up. It took 14 years to build. We saw the steel was working. When this project started, New York City was still a 5-story city. Before the bridge is done, we're building the first skyscraper buildings using steel girders built taller, steel cables built elevated built for people safely, and freight cable fires for limit because of the steel technology first used in Brooklyn by the Brooklyn Bridge. The Brooklyn Bridge is what makes this whole city possible. And as time goes on, we trust the steel more, because next we're going to go into that blue bridge, the Manhattan Bridge, and you're going to see right through the towers of the Manhattan Bridge. So you might think, hey, that can't be as strong as the Brooklyn Bridge. Well, think again. Because when I'm doing a tour on a bus, I can't take the bus over the Brooklyn Bridge. It's too heavy, not allowed. That's bigger than any bus allowed over the Brooklyn Bridge. But if you take the Manhattan Bridge, this take vans, buses, trucks, double-decker buses, and subway trains can go over the Manhattan Bridge. Brooklyn Bridge is basically 80% stone, 20% metal. By 1909, the Manhattan Bridge, 80% metal, 20% stone. Less volume, less structure overall, but more steel, more strength. Catch a train here. So they'll come there. The next bridge, that's the Williamsburg Bridge. Okay, by now you're trying to figure out how to go over this bridge. Brooklyn, Manhattan, Williamsburg, BMW. Now they're not in order. The Williamsburg Bridge is the second of these three. That opened 20 years after the Brooklyn Bridge. Look, in 1903, we are not hiding the steel, not anymore. It's out there for all to see. Also, the Williamsburg Bridge is longer than the Brooklyn Bridge. Yes, it took the record by, well, like 4.5 feet. It is longer. That part was shown off. But the Williamsburg Bridge is stronger and that can carry trucks and buses and subway trains. Last part is really impressive because by 1903, subway wasn't running yet, but we know it's coming. But before we could build the Williamsburg Bridge, there's something about New York that had to change. And the thing to remember, when the Brooklyn Bridge opened, that was a bridge between two separate cities. New York was just Manhattan. Brooklyn was its own city. Now New York, just Manhattan, was already at that point the biggest city in the country in population. The great landmark, the island's full of people. Brooklyn was the third biggest city in the country. And it was big. There was over 1 million people then. There are not 10 cities in the U.S. over 1 million people now. So that's the problem. These are major cities. Built between two major cities like building between two states. The only way to get the bridge built, it had to go from City Hall in Manhattan to what was then City Hall in Brooklyn. Not a smart move, but you had to keep the mayors happy. But after the bridge opened, the people of Manhattan looked across the river and they saw something they hadn't seen before. Space. Understand, there are more people in Manhattan with shorter buildings than there are today. It was a much more crowded island in those days. But they looked across the river and saw these spacious places where they could live and get to work on time if we build more bridges. But to build more bridges, we're going to have to get rid of at least one of those mayors. So it's all a consequence too. 15 years after the Brooklyn Bridge opens, we have the Act of Consolidation, 1898, when New York goes from just Manhattan to 5 boroughs all at once. Meaning all at once, Manhattan takes over Staten Island, Brooklyn, Queens, and the Bronx all at once. It did that because at that point, there were more people living in Manhattan, the smallest of the 5 boroughs in the area, than those other 4 boroughs put together. Now they're consolidating. Now we can start to build. Starting with the Williamsburg Bridge, 5 years after consolidation. But that is not a bridge that goes from City Hall to City Hall. It's also not really a bridge meant to go to Brooklyn. It's meant to get out of that neighborhood, the other end, and that's the Lower East Side, which in those days of immigration was the most crowded neighborhood on the planet, more crowded than modern-day Calcutta. Too crowded. So they built the Williamsburg Bridge so the people on the Lower East Side could go take over Brooklyn. And they did. And then we started building bridges and tunnels like crazy. By the time we go on the Williamsburg Bridge, we'll cross 5 subway tunnels built subsequently. By the time we go on the QUEENSBORO Bridge, 1908, 5 more. And it works, because we're still the biggest city in the country. We're twice the biggest, second biggest city. We just set a record last census. 8.8 million people in the 5 boroughs of New York City. But it's not thanks to Manhattan, not anymore. Because Manhattan has basically, since those times, lost more residents than live in the city of Seattle. So where do they go? No, not Seattle. Brooklyn went from 1.1 million then to 2.8 million now. That's our biggest growing population. It's been that since the 1950s. And since the 1950s, we always said Brooklyn would be the fourth largest city in America to split off on its own. Now you would still say that, but in the last census, they only made it back to third place. And 10,000 people behind Chicago. Yeah, feel that breath on the back of your neck, Chicago? That's Brooklyn. Smell that breath? That's what real pizza smells like. Now, we still call this the Brooklyn Navy Yard, even though, you know what? The Navy left in 1966, and the day they left was the last day New York City was the biggest port in the world. It's also the day we lost 100,000 jobs there that day. Another 400,000 jobs as a consequence of losing the port. Yeah, I've seen lots of theories of why we had a fiscal crisis 60 years later. I think it might start working this way. Now, that's all rebounded. This is working towards, again, I mean, new industries, but still. But also, it's the new style of waterfront, of residential buildings, even luxury apartments, where previously no one wanted to live. Now, if you look over your right, it's pretty obvious those shiny glass buildings are luxury apartments, right? Well, what's not so obvious is when we're using old parts of the waterfront for that purpose as well. So once we get under the Williamsburg Bridge, over the right, you're going to see an old brick building. It's over 100 years old, and frankly, it's going to look like it was abandoned 100 years ago. But I can assure you, less than 10 years ago, that building was where the Domino's sugar plant was still cranking out sugar. And when that closed in 2013, that's actually the first we were not taking sugar in New York history. There was the sugar city, the Dutch state. Well, don't worry, we still got a Domino's plant up in Concord. And so that was historic, actually. So we landmarked the building. The landmarking really only just means you got to keep those outside walls. That's all they kept. It's a shell of the building. But they're going to fill that shell up, not with a new factory, but with luxury apartments. And you look up the river, so again, those shiny glass buildings further up the river on the right side, those are obviously luxury apartments. And those are so new. They were still working on those when I left the boats 2 years ago. But you see the older, low white building in front of those buildings, okay? Because that was a factory. That was an envelope factory. One day that folded. 2.5 hours. But they gutted it. What they put inside there? Luxury apartments. But that's what they do, all these old factories. It doesn't matter what the factory did. It could be sugar, it could be envelopes. I remember where they converted the old X-Lac factory over in Atlantic Avenue. Frankly, this boat gets stuck in the water too long. This boat's becoming luxury apartments. But over there on the Manhattan side of the East River, there's a very different story. We have been going past a long slew of, let's be nice, nondescript buildings. That's from the Brooklyn Bridge. Actually, we're going to keep going up to 23rd Street. These were the first residential buildings we built on the waterfront. Yeah, we built it after World War II. We're still the biggest port in the world, but things are starting to slow up a little. Well, what did we build? Luxury apartments? Well, not exactly. We built housing projects, co-ops, more housing projects, and once we're past the power plant, that's where you find Stuyvesant Town, and that was emergency housing for returning veterans from World War II. See, this was the mindset then. Folks, if you're really desperate for a place to live, I'm sorry, you're going to have to live on the waterfront. There's a different waterfront then. You know what, this is before the Clean Water Act. It smelled different.